When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Yes, hello there. Good morning to you all out there in internet land. Welcome to Join Up Dots episode 41. I do apologise. I am losing my voice a little bit today. So if I'm sounding a little bit deeper, a little bit sexier than normal, that's the reason. So I could go down at any moment, but I'm sure I won't because I've got a guy who I've had to cancel before. So I want to make sure that we get through this show because he's got a lot to talk about and he's really a gentleman who's finding his true path in life. He's a man who literally swims amongst the sharks on a daily basis. The host and founder of the brilliant Shark Tank podcast, he's found a way of combining his love for producing top-notch online content with his interest in entrepreneurs and, of course, the program Shark Tank. If you're in the UK, then think Dragon's Den and you'll have an idea of what his show is all about. So how has he managed to create an audience that want to listen to stories that, in their own way, have been told before on TV? How has he managed to hook a stream of contestants on the show that are ready for his grilling? There were a couple of top-notch fish jokes in there, just in case you missed them. Well, he's done it with passion, charisma, perseverance, and a belief in his product. He says that he's just a regular guy who married an amazing woman and has two boys that are his life. So when he's not being romantic to this wonderful woman, playing and inspiring his boys, or wandering around Phoenix in Arizona, then you can find him playing soccer whilst dreaming of playing for Arsenal Football Club from the United Kingdom. We really need to talk about that. It seems he has a lot on his plate, so I'm grateful that he's found the time to come on the show and join up some dots with me today. Let me introduce to you the host of Shark Tank podcast, Mr. T.J. Hale. How are you today, sir?
It's wonderful to be in the garden, sir. How are you?
Yeah, you are. You're in the garden, at the back of the garden, just by the swings and just by the trampoline as well.
You know, you told me you were being extra sexy today, and I thought that was because we finally got this little encounter, this rendezvous going, but now you blame it on your voice and being tired. So that means I'm going to have to work extra hard today, doesn't it?
You are the professional. You're going to pull me through. It's going to be your power, your charisma, and your perseverance. And, and you've got all those things, haven't you? Because you are really... You're creating something that is really making its mark on the online world at the moment.
That's true. It's been really fun over the last 6 months to kind of see the growth explode. And for some of your listeners, maybe they can relate with this. I started from scratch. No online presence, no blogging, no friends, just me and my lonesome kind of chipping away at it. So to see it come to fruition is really, it's a special thing.
Why do that? Why do something when you haven't got any online presence? It seems to be the harder way of starting, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's at the beginning, it was, I would dang near say impossible. I had some friends that were kind of getting into it, and it's actually kind of like the soccer story. We do need to talk about that. I felt like I could hear Chelsea and Manchester City fans kind of like turn the station when you said that. So.
You wouldn't even recognize the name of my team, Ipswich Town Football Club. Do you recognize them?
Isn't that who Roy Keane coached for a while?
It was, yes. Well done. I'm impressed.
I'm new, but I'm trying. I'm making an effort. I remember that Sir Alex had said some pretty nasty things about his coaching record. That's why it rang a bell.
Yeah, no, you did well there, sir. I tip my hat at you.
Excellent. All right, so I just lost my train of thought. So professionalism is out the window. Where were we?
Well, you were saying about you started with no platform online presence at all, and it was just you chipping away.
Oh, yeah. So, you know, I'm in sales and I'm working. I got a great gig. You know, everything's going well, but I've got a buddy who's determined to make his mark online. And every day he comes in and says, look at this guy. Look what he's doing online. And some of the names you'd mentioned, he's like, you know, look at Jeremy Franson or look at Pat Flynn. And I don't know who these people are. And I kind of care. I'm humoring them, right? But as I started to learn about what they were doing and the way they were taking it to the, you know, there's a movie called Zoolander where they said, let's take it to the runway. I said, they're taking it to the online world and they're really putting their stamp on it. And I was impressed and kind of blown away by something. It's kind of like when you're a child and you go to, you know, Disneyland for the first time and you go, what is this? where am I? And I had that moment, right? That epiphany of, how did I live this long and not realize this was something I could be involved in? And so I decided I need to do it, and I jumped in. And fortunately, the first venture has gone pretty well, and I'm always looking for where it's going to lead. It's been exciting.
I've got this image of you doing Blue Steel from Zoolander. As soon as you said that, I thought he's going to hit with Blue Steel, but you didn't go that way.
Yeah. I'm doing it. I wish we had a webcam. I'm working on Magnum, but it's nowhere near ready, so we're not even going to talk about that.
So it is funny, isn't it? Because what you're saying emphasizes, certainly the online guests that I've had, you know too much. When you suddenly find that there are people out there creating an income that's giving them flexibility of hours, then you kind of put different glasses on and you think, I can't believe that I've been doing a 9-to-5 job for all my life, when effectively I could, not easy, but I could create an income and also create a life that is under my own terms.
Yeah, I think that was part of it. Another one for me was that, I had a lot of the things that I felt like I wanted in life. I have an amazing wife. I have 2 great kids. But maybe it's just my sense of overconfidence. When I was growing up, I always thought, you know what? I can do anything I want to do. We live in a time where you really have so much control over your own destiny. So why not do something great? And, when you're a little kid, you want to be an astronaut, or you want to be a professional footballer, you want to do amazing things. And as you get older, life kind of beats you down a little bit and tells you can't do those things, and you get resolved to whatever your calling is, and it's typically not something that's as exciting as what you had in mind. And so you see things like this and go, wait, these guys aren't Bernie Madoffing anyone. They're not ripping people off. They're not cheating the system. They're creating these incredible solopreneur lifestyles, doing something that, I don't want to say anybody can do it, but doing something that 20 years ago you couldn't have done. It didn't exist. And I was completely floored by that. So I started, engaging it, learning as much as I could, getting online, what I call virtual mentors, because they're one-sided relationships. And then I picked a format, picked a platform, and I dove in, and I decided I was going to figure out how to make it work. And what's funny about my story is the gentleman who introduced me to I mentioned Pat Flynn. I'm sure, David, you're familiar with his work.
I think he's the most commonly raised name on all my shows.
Got to be. But what's funny is, in the real world, I talked to Pat on my show one time. I said, you know what? Do you want to be the celebrity? Do you want to be that guy, who's famous and can't go anywhere? I personally would shun a celebrity lifestyle. I just don't think it's worth it. I just want to live life on my terms. And Pat said, it's not like that. I'm an internet celebrity. And he's real humble about it. He's like, if you want to call me that. So when I go to the store, nobody knows who I am. I go to Disneyland. I don't get people taking pictures. Although he said he gets recognized more now. He's like, it's the best of both worlds. You get the freedom and you get the total anonymity because you're just a celebrity in your little online fishbowl in your niche. So that to me was really attractive. And my buddy, who I'd constantly been mocking and making fun of for failing miserably, he encouraged me to take a step and to do something on my own and actually join with him rather than mock him. So it didn't take much convincing. And now the podcast is blown up, and it's given me tons of opportunities. And I get mean emails from my buddy all the time going, hey, man, give me some ideas. I need to figure my issues out, because he had about a 2-year head start on me. So I'm always giving him a hard time.
It's an interesting thing. If we go right back to the very first thing that you spoke about, when you're younger, you believe you can do anything. But when you get to a certain point and you get beaten down and responsibilities take over, why do you think that is so common? It's not just common, it's just the standard route of things, isn't it? We leave our dreams behind. Why do you think that we allow that to happen when on a daily basis I'm speaking to people who are saying to me, no, actually, you can have your dreams, you've just got to go for them?
I think that when we're young, we're all told that we can do anything, or most of us are. And because we're kids, we believe it. We don't see the barriers. We don't see the challenges. We don't see the amount of work that has to be put in to do the things that successful people are doing. So we just assume that it's true. And I think what happens is, I was actually listening to a guy that I had on my show named James Altucher, and he has a really successful podcast. He's a contrarian thinker and a writer that I really enjoy. And I think he was talking about the superhero gene, basically talking about what we're actually capable of if we program ourselves. And he mentioned a stat that when we're kids, we laugh an average of 20 plus times a day. But when we're an adult, it's 3 or less. And I know people who never laugh ever, and I try to stay away from them. But And they had a discussion about why is that? Why do we stop laughing as we get older? And I think those two things are related. And we start looking at people who are really successful in a more cynical light and say, you know, obviously they know something we don't, but it's probably not something I'd want to know anyway, or probably not something I'd be willing to do, or they compromised their principles at some point along the way. And I think that's dangerous thinking. You know, what it really means is that we haven't paid our dues, you know, taken our stripes, and we haven't figured out where the value is that we can offer. We know we're great, and we know that other people might think we're great, but we haven't connected those dots. And if you're not focused on what's valuable to others, and I heard someone say that, you know, the definition of a billionaire should be someone who's helped a billion people improve their life. And we haven't done that. And a lot of us haven't even started to think about how we can do that.
When do you think that your unique path, well, I'll ask a sub-question. Do you think now that you're on your unique path, do you think this is your thing and you're going to be moving on an online environment for the rest of your life?
I think that if you look down at Google Maps and you could see the whole big picture, I think that I made a transition that if there's a calling in my life, if there's something I'm supposed to do to bring value to other people's, I think I'm on the right path now. Where it goes, I can't say. I just know that I'm finally in a place, you know, despite previous business successes, you know, wins in business, I'm in a place now where my circle is attracting the right kind of attention, the right people, and good things are happening because of that. So it's exciting to know that I'm in that sphere. Whether it's the right path or where it goes, I don't know. And personally, I've never cared less because I'm having a lot more fun on this road than I've ever had before.
It is weird, isn't it? When that happens and you suddenly feel like you're almost playing, but you are providing value to people who are responding to that. You know, I remember the second day of launching this podcast, I got a letter from a lady called Paige, and I've mentioned her a couple of times, and she's in Arizona, funnily enough. And she contacted me and she said, David, I really like your show. Thank you very much for putting it out there and stuff. And it kind of blew me away, absolutely blew me away, because until then, I almost thought that there was no one listening and I could almost say what I wanted. Then that email came back to me and I thought, whoa, no, I've got to keep to a structure. I need to build a show that people understand what they're getting, but still hopefully have that sort of playful element to it.
We talked about, you know, how kids laugh 20 times a day, and really that's what it is. Doing this, I think I can do whatever I want. I can focus on having fun. I can focus on lifting up people, helping them through their day, get through the entrepreneurial grind, which is really what my show's about. Is look, you can't see the forest through the trees, but you will get there if you're doing the right things long enough. So just try to enjoy it, because if you don't enjoy it, you're never going to stick with it. And Mark Cuban talks about this on Shark Tank. You know, if you have to do something that you love enough that when it's 2 a.m. and all you can think of is going to sleep, you go, no, I can't stop. I have to keep doing this. And you'll never win that war if it's something that you're not really passionate about, something you don't love.
I've always been a show me the money guy. And I've tried to provide value to people, and I've tried to do things in the right way, and I've never screwed anyone over. You know, I've created a bunch of friends that I'm sure that I could go back at any time and they would say, yeah, you was a good boss, you was a good employee, you haven't caused any problems. But effectively, I would go where the money was. And if somebody offered me X amount of thousands of pounds more for a job, I didn't really quibble whether I was going to like it or not. I just went for that job. Looking back on many of those, they were bad decisions. And when I followed the money, they were leading me into the most unhappy areas of my life. I'm now doing this, and on the great scheme of things, I wouldn't really care if I wasn't earning any money out of it. Of course, you need to earn money out of it because you need to pay your bills and stuff. But it's exactly what Mark Cuban's saying. It's exactly what you're saying. It's now a 14-hour day I'm coming up to. Would never have dreamt of doing that for anyone. That's slave labour. But once you're doing it yourself and you find your passion, it's almost like a drug. You can't stop, can you?
Yeah, and I'm sure, you know, you're married. You talk about your mom's winning out in the pregame, and I thought, you know, people who don't understand it, people who don't see the vision, they'll tell you you're crazy. And I honestly think that's a good place to be in, because anyone who's ever done anything great has stood on a mountain of people who said they were nuts. And, you know, sometimes you are. That's okay. You got to figure that out for yourself. But yeah, 14-hour day. Let's talk about flow. You know, these kids in South Korea who can play, you know, StarCraft for 3 days straight until they actually die of a heart attack. That's flow. That's doing something you love so much time speeds up or slows down or whatever it is. And we all have things in our life that put us in that zone where we feel like we're actually flowing. And people who are listening, you can think about what that is that you can do where not only would you do it for free, but time would actually slow down or speed up, or, I'm not explaining that part of it very well. Video games are a good analogy though, because my wife would be like, how could someone sit for 3 days with a controller in their hand? I'm like, look, how can you, sit and do what XYZ thing you do? I don't want to embarrass her, but XYZ thing you do for 5 hours without blinking, like kids screaming, all your other responsibilities out the window, but we all have it. And if you can find a way to make that support you and turn that into a business, you're going to be a happy person.
I once sat through 5 Rocky films at the cinema, back to back to back, with like a 5-minute break to whiz off to the toilet, and it felt like nothing. When I looked at it, I thought, blimey, I could have flown to, say, I don't know, Orlando by that time. But yeah, Rocky 1, Rocky 2, Rocky 3, all the way through. And to be honest, by the time you get to Rocky 5, you're kind of thinking, I think I've had enough here. But I pushed through. And it was a breeze to get through that because I was in that flow.
And yeah, I mean, that's what, almost a full work day or a little more. Had you been at that job where you make an X amount of pounds more than the one you gave up, that would have been the slowest day of your life. And that's really the lesson there.
I think everyone needs to have the Rocky experience. Don't you, Mr. Hale?
Oh, I've had it multiple times. Man, I've done that the Rocky Marathon. I've got a couple marathons I've done, but you're right. When you get to Rocky 5, you're back on the downhill slope. You're heading home.
But it still has the best line, and I've mentioned this numerous times, and a couple of my guests have actually quoted this as their success manual, their success quote, and it was from Rocky 6, Rocky Balboa, when he is talking to his son outside his restaurant, and he says to his son something along the lines of, it doesn't matter how hard you can hit, it's how hard you can be hit and still keep moving forward. Now that is profound.
It is. I thought you were going to say one more round, or I didn't hear no bell. I didn't know where that was going, but I like that a lot.
Yeah, no, I think Mr. Stallone, you've hit something there. Talking about sort of words that are going to live forever. This is round about the time on the show where I bring Steve Jobs on, and he did a speech back in 2005, his commencement speech, which has gone down in history. I focus in on just the middle bit when he talks about looking back and connecting the dots. I want to play it now, and then I want to ask your opinion on these words, whether you think they're relevant, whether you think they're not relevant at all, and whether you actually feel that your life has had any bearing on the words of Steve Jobs. So I'm going to play these, and then we're going to have a chat about them afterwards.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever, because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference.
Relevant or not?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember the speech, and I remember it because when I read it, it really rang true to me, especially because at the top, I think right when he started, he said, this is the closest I've ever gotten to a college graduation.
That's right.
And you think about our society and how much of that plan is already in place for you. You got to get good marks in school, you got to go to college, then you got to get into your first job. And the problem is that infrastructure has been crumbling for a long time. So the kids now who are on that route, and I don't know what the main demographic of your audience is, but if they're young professionals or people finishing up college or just kind of in the first, wave or two of their career, what they're finding is the promise is not matching up to reality. And for that reason, I think Steve Jobs' comment or his insight is even more valuable than ever, because I don't know that much about the political scene in England at the moment, but I know here college is more expensive than it's ever been, and the ROI is the lowest it's ever been. There's no guarantee of jobs. A lot of the people I know who have professional degrees are working very low wage jobs, and they're raising their hands up in the air going, what happened here? And as much as I want to put the blame for that on the people who promised us what would happen if we did what they told us, the blame is on us, because we had decided that there was a path for us, and we listened and trusted to people who did not know what it would look like when we got there. So if you want to call that connecting those dots or looking backward, I think that's a great way to describe it. But what I think is happening now is people are realizing that what the promise they were sold is not the reality, And if I were speaking to people who were taking that, I would say, look, I would take everything with a grain of salt and just assume that everything you're doing here may not work out at all the way you're planning on, and be ready for a plan B, because that's the reality that a lot of people are facing. And some of them have lived so long that it's too late for them to start over, or they feel like it's hopeless. And that's a sad place to be, which is the message that I share on the podcast all the time. You know, it's not too late. You just have to open your eyes to new possibilities.
I was speaking to a chap the other day called Joel Boggis, who's got some podcasts in America at the moment. And he was saying that he does a certain amount of coaching. And he says it's never too late to start your second part of life. And I kind of like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say one of the most, I don't want to say valuable, but one of the things that impacts me the most now that I've built this online community is getting the feedback and hearing from individual people about the changes they're making in their life. And it's really, really satisfying. And you could probably relate with this, to hear people say, look, this is what I was going through. This is where my mindset was. This is the despair that I felt. And now I'm seeing things in a whole new light. And I know that because it happened to me. And, I'm an average intelligence guy, a hard worker. I thought I had everything figured out. So it's not like I had this epiphany where my whole life changed, but there's a little slice of it where I said, look, here was the most important professional part of my life sitting next to me the whole time, invisible. I was totally oblivious to it. And that's something I would like everyone to experience if they haven't already.
How did you choose Shark Tank? Out of all the things that you could have done, why was that? And why has it taken on so much?
This is actually a really interesting part of the chat, because when I decided that I was going to jump in online, my buddy, I refer to him as my buddy, my friend, had tried to compete with a company called VRBO, which is it's like for rentals if you're traveling out of town, condos, things like that. He also tried to do something like Airbnb. Tried to start a new blog in the community to get realtors involved in what was going on. I mean, everything revolved around the blogging platform. And I'm looking at it and going, all right, there's a blog for everything. So if I'm going to do that, I know what that road looks like. It's going to take me a long time, a lot of work. There's no guarantees. So I started looking at myself and saying, all right, well, if I could do something for free, if I was going to be in flow, what would it be? What would I spend the most time doing that I would do for free? And I like to talk. I like to get to know people. I like to ask them a lot of questions, find out what makes them tick. So he was listening to Pat Flynn's podcast, and I got on there and said, hey, this is pretty cool. Like, it's a radio show that's not really on the radio. And I started looking at how many people were listening to podcasts and what they were listening to and how loyal of a fan base they were, depending on, what they were listening to. And I found out that I looked at that as the radio of the future and said, all right, so I know that this is where I'm going to make my mark. So that was the first thing. What's my platform? What kind of soapbox am I going to stand on? The next thing was, now that I decided, maybe your guys are graphic artists and they're going to do Instagram or YouTube or whatever it is, I knew that podcasting had the audience, had the momentum, and also was what I would enjoy. So that's number one. Number two was, all right, so if I'm going to do this, do I want to do the blogging route where I start from scratch and nobody knows who I am? I don't really have a choice at the moment because nobody knows who I am. Or do I want to figure out how I can splice into an existing fan base and master that niche and then kind of write my own ticket from there? And I think I call it the Schwarzenegger effect, David. And what that means is Arnold Schwarzenegger told, if you read old interviews or see old movies, Bridget Nielsen, a Rocky connection, she talks how Arnold Schwarzenegger said he was going to be Hollywood's biggest box office star back when they were nobodies, back when he was weightlifting with girls sitting on the ends of the barbell and doing who knows what. But he knew that speaking terrible English, not being particularly attractive, being new to the country, he had all these obstacles. He wasn't going to let that stop him, but he also wanted to make sure it didn't take him 20 years if he thought it could take him 5. So what did he do? He said, well, I'm already in good shape. I'm already like this massive human evolution. Maybe I can jump the bridge from being the world's best bodybuilder to the world's best action hero. And when he did that, it took him very little time to accomplish his goal once he had topped out on his niche and jumped to the other one, or bridged it, or however you want to call it. So my advice to people would be, if you have a goal to master a niche or to be the world's best something, you got to look at the ways you can accomplish it and figure out which one's going to cost the least and have the most impact. And I say cost in terms of money, time, effort, whatever it is, or exposure. You have to get out in front of that audience as quickly as possible as an established expert. So I took my own advice and said, all right, so if I want a podcast, I had 3 things I really thought I would be good at. And, obviously you're going to suck a little bit for a while, but I thought that I could learn them very quickly and, get by. One of them was politics. Another one was, I just totally forgot because I guess it's not on the radar anymore. And the third one was that on every Monday when I came into work, we would spend like 3 hours of company time talking about Shark Tank. Every Monday. Who made a good deal? Who screwed up? Who didn't know what they were talking about? Which shark do you want to work with? And it's kind of like people come in. I mean, in England, it's got to be the Premier League, right? You spend the first Monday and Tuesday just talking about every meaningless aspect of every game that you saw. And
not just Mondays and Tuesdays, I promise you, it can take over your life.
Oh, yeah, and absolutely there. I'm sure here I'm a lone ranger, right? Nobody, you know how many people care about the Premier League here? It's rough, man, because I'm a big fan. But anyway, you know what that feels like. So I thought, all right, well, if I'm in England and I love football and I'm a good talker, well, there's an audience out there who need to hear my message, who want to hear my message. I'm going to take that conversation and I'm going to broadcast it out. And instead of just being the water cooler of my 5 buddies in the morning, it's going to be the whole town or the whole state in my instance, or the whole country. And eventually I'm going to see how far I can take this. So I chose Shark Tank based on those conversations I was already having every day in the interest level of people that I met. Anyone who's in my circle of influence, anyone that I networked with, anyone that was in sales or business or entrepreneurship, watched the show. And oftentimes our get to know you conversations, our sales calls would involve that conversation. I thought, that's it. Light bulbs off. That's what I'm going to do. So then you research the competition, see who's doing it, see what kind of results they're getting, and you start formulating that path of how I'm going to dominate this niche, take it over, and become the go-to guy. And that's where it started.
And so how many people were in the Shark Tank when you started podcasts and blogs, and what was your competition?
So now this is kind of a 2-part question, because when I went online, I didn't see a Shark Tank podcast, and maybe I was just too dumb to know any better because I was new to this. There actually was a Shark Tank fan podcast, and now the gentleman who runs it's a good friend of mine. His name's Piers Mars. I actually did his show recently, and he does a good job. It was when I had actually started recording and kind of doing all the back leg work that I was learning. I didn't know WordPress. I didn't know how to host a podcast. I didn't even know what equipment I would need. I'm figuring all that out, and then I find out there is a podcast. I go, oh, okay, well, this is going to help me because now I know there's a market for it, and I'm going to see what he's doing so I can differentiate myself. That show is basically focused on recaps with the occasional interview, and it was just to kind of help people get a second opinion. Because, when you watch, if it's Dragon's Den or whatever show, or even the game, right? You watch it, you have an opinion of how bad the referee was or why so-and-so played well. Well, it's always nice to kind of get someone else's, and that's what that show did. So I thought, all right, well, what are the other things that people talk about on Shark Tank? And there are a lot of them, but for me, there are a lot of questions answered of, hey, look, if you've got a 90-minute segment that gets chopped down to 8 minutes, we're missing a lot. People watch the show for a couple different reasons. They're fans of the show, they're business owners, or they want to go on Shark Tank, or they're people that are entrepreneurs that really want the free advice they're getting from billionaires that they can implement in their own businesses. So I took that one and said, all right, well, if that's the most valuable, there's 90 minutes worth of it, 4 times a show, we're getting 40 minutes total of a potential 6 hours of entrepreneurial training. Why don't I figure out what else is said that we don't know about? Why don't I figure out while I'm doing that what these businesses did to get where they were, how they got on the show, how they took advantage of the Shark Tank effect or the Shark Tank tsunami, how they made sure that they impressed investors enough to actually get funds, because that's going to resonate with anybody who's a business owner or a fan of the show. And I'm going to try to capture all 3 of those markets in one program. And that was the strategy. And I just kind of been tweaking it ever since and trying to make sure that every episode's better than the last. And it's been fantastic. It's been a lot of fun, and it's been profitable.
And how many episodes have you done now?
I think this morning I recorded number 60. I do one a week.
And did you batch them, or do you just actually record one a week?
I typically do 2 or 3 a week, and then I'll take a week off or 2 weeks off. I try to keep 4 episodes ahead at all times.
I kind of envy that, because I'm doing a daily show. And the Achilles heel of a daily show is producing enough content. And there's certain weeks where I've got so much content coming towards me, so many guests, that I think, oh, this is amazing. I'm going to have such a store cupboard of these shows. And then there's times where I think, oh, I can't get one. I can't get one for love nor money. And I live in a sort of semi-state of panic, trying to get enough guests to keep it going. But it's never dried up yet. and it's a beautiful thing when I look in my to be released shows, and I think, blimey, I could go on a holiday till September now, and the show would still go live every single day. But it's hard work to do that. So I do envy you, sort of doing as you are, one a week. Well, would you ever go to 2 or 3 a week?
I would. In fact, I've been considering, and, we can talk about where this path has led. I got an offer last week there's a gentleman who owns a site who gets over 1 million views, and it's not business related, it's more political. But I mentioned earlier that was something that I thought about doing. And they want to start a podcast, but rather than have me teach them how to do it, they want me to just do it. And they would bring me into the partnership. So for anybody who out there who is a web guru, 1 million views can be pretty profitable every day. And it turns out they're getting, between 300,000 and 600,000 unique visitors a week. And so now you've got a podcast listener base. And you know this, David, because you know the metrics on the podcasting. If you talk about a guy like John Dumas, who everybody knows now, he promises his sponsors a minimum of 16,000 downloads per episode. He's probably giving them, 25% more than that. And that's what he bases the charges off of. So if you got a site that's doing 300,000 visitors a week, you can kind of do the math on what a minimum listener base should be. And that would catapult a podcaster into the big time. I mean, Adam Carolla here in the States, if you're familiar with it, I'm ignorant. I don't know who you're familiar with and who you're not. But
I'm aware of them because of my interest in podcasts. And I must admit, I listened to a couple of Adam Carolla. I don't really understand him. He just seems a bit of a misery guts to my plate.
Maybe we love that over here. Mark Marone's the one who's gotten really big lately, and his podcast is just all about how much his life sucks. So who knows? But I'm going to stick to the numbers of what Adam Carolla does. He gets about, I think it's 1 million downloads a day, and he's one of the top 3 podcasters there is. And so you look at the potential markets that are out there that haven't touched podcasting yet, and you go, oh, man, holy smokes, like anybody with a huge web following should have a podcast, because you're coalescing the core audience, and it's highly, highly profitable if you get the right kind of sponsors with those downloads. So I looked at that and said, that kind of thing could put everything else I had on my plate to the side. And so going back to being in a circle where you attract the right kind of attention, that is one of the takeaways I'd like your audience to have is, look, the path I'm on, how long have I been on it? What kind of opportunities does it bring to me? Is anybody, I think when we were young, we assume, if we're good at sports that, someday we're going to get a call from a coach that says, hey man, suit up, today's your day. Or we're going to get a call from a CEO. We really like what you've been up to. It just doesn't work that way until you've got a body of work and until you've put yourself in a position where people can see that you're adding enough value that they want to draw you in to their circle. And that's what this has done for me. That's what I encourage your listeners to determine where that would be for them, what they could do on a daily basis where people would look at their work and go, hey, I got to get to know David better. This guy's just knocking it out.
So what are your downloads at the moment, if you don't mind me asking, for a weekly show, to give people some contrast on the 1 million Adam Carolla to mine and to yours? What are your downloads?
Yeah, well, let's start with the benchmark. I just read the other day that Libsyn, who is one of the major podcast hosting companies, said that it's less than, I think, 15%. I think the average download per episode per month is around 12 to 1,500. I know I'm going to butcher this. I just read this like a week ago. And it's less than 15% that are getting over, it's 2,000 episodes 2,000 downloads per episode. So probably butchered that, but knowing that was good, because I think the problem a lot of new podcasters have is they see all these people doing really well and they fall victim to the overnight success trap. They look at that and go, hey, I'm good at this. David's great and he's silky smooth and he's got a good following, but I'm good at this too. Like, why is his show doing so well? Well, I've been doing it for a year, and for the first 6 months, I had a hard time getting traffic at all. And then you start hitting benchmarks. So I was getting, 50 downloads an episode, 60 downloads an episode. And I would interview people that had a big social media following. That was my plan, was, look, I'm going to bring all their circles into my show. But what I found was a lot of their people just follow them. They're friends with that company. They like their product. They're not necessarily interested in all the rest of them. So I had to look at it and pivot and retool. And as of yesterday, my podcasts all fall in a range of 15,000 on the high to about 4,500 downloads on the low. And those are a lot of the older ones that, people just don't know are there.
Per episode?
So, per episode.
Well done, sir. That's amazing.
It's not bad. I mean, it's profitable. But here's the thing. You're always learning, right? You're always figuring things out. You've got a daily. In some ways, I envy you because I think, man, if I could do 10,000 downloads a day, Well, that'd be huge, but then it's just a lot of work too. So I'm kind of lazy. But you look at that and say, all right, well, now like what I'm doing on my side, I'm looking at it and go, there are all these people who can't find, there are 8 million weekly viewers of Shark Tank. I'm pretty sure that at least 1 million of those people would listen to my show. So I'm doing something wrong because I don't have 1 million listening to the show. So now my main motivating factor is how do I get those other, 7,950,000 or whatever it is. And I'm looking at my site going, there's a lot of things I'm not doing that will make it easy for me to find them. And that's the challenge right now.
Do you like doing those? I've mentioned this to so many people that since I've been doing this, really, all I want to do is be behind the mic. I don't really want to be messing around with WordPress. I don't want to be Twittering. I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to be doing that. If I could have a team around me doing all that kind of business and I just come in and go, bang, do the show and away, I would be in heaven. I absolutely would. But I know I've got to sort of progress through that to sort of grow the platform before then you can bring income in and you can sort of provide outside help and virtual assistants and whatever. So do you like the thought of actually targeting these markets, or would you be quite happy to be behind the mic like me and get other people to find the gaps where you're not focused?
Oh, yeah. In a perfect world, I would be laying on my bed with those little foam things between my toes, and I'd have someone feeding me grapes with a microphone boom sitting over, and I'd just talk all day long. But I really love the challenge, too. Like today I was talking to one of my web guys, and he's like, look, here's 3 things that we're not doing. He's in negotiations to sell a software product to either Square or Squarespace, and that's probably more than I should have said already, but he's meeting with these guys, and he comes back with all these great ideas, and he looks at the site and goes, I can't believe I didn't think of this before. We need to do this, this, and this. For me, as much as I love working the mic, I just love the epiphanies, those moments where you go, oh yeah, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I see that before? Because that's the same thing that happened to me when I decided I wanted to go online. I want to take it to the runway. What else am I not seeing? And that's where I get a high from.
Well, I was struck by your words, and I hear them all the time, but the overnight success. We all want the overnight success. We all want to come out the gates absolutely hitting home runs. It really doesn't happen, does it? And to a man and a woman, if you sat them down and you said to them, do you think you could do this? Oh, no, it's not going to happen. So why do you think that we all benchmark ourselves against people and just see the highlights, where we almost don't care that you've taken a year building up a platform, building up an audience? We just want to go, he's a success. Bang, that's what I want.
Our brain is wired. I'm going to get into science here, so I'm sure people are going to tell me how wrong I am, but our brain is wired to make judgments based on comparison. So, when we decide that we're hungry, there's always a Burger King and a McDonald's, and we have to decide if we want that, if we want to drive down the street to Wendy's. When we're getting ready to marry someone, we compare our spouse to, what do I like about her versus the last 20 people that I had a relationship with, or in my case, the last 2 people, because that was the breaks. But so many of our decisions on a daily basis are done that way. And I don't know what the psychological term for it is, but there's a game. My wife loves games, board games, whatever games, loves them. So we play them all the time. And one of our favorites is Wits and Wagers. You played that before, David?
No, haven't heard of that one.
All right, you dig it. And what it is we like trivia, but it's trivia for people who don't love trivia, because what happens is if I say, what year was the War of 1812? Probably everybody would have a similar answer. If I said, how many stairs are there in the Empire State Building, we're going to get a varied response. So Wits and Wagers takes that answer, they're all numbers, and it says, everybody write down your guess. And once they're written, you flip them all over, and then you play craps. You line them all out from lowest to highest, and you bet on which one's the closest to the correct answer without going over. And based on the further the number is from the center, the odds get better if you're correct, right? So the person who says 100 stairs and the person who says 20,000, they're getting 6-to-1 odds on their money, or 5-to-1. So now you've got some incentive to be correct, and you get paid for it. Now, the reason I'm telling you all this is because what happens is when those all flip over, what happens is you start to second guess your initial assumption or the initial knowledge that you thought you had about the subject. So there are times, and I'm going to put this in a sports terms, there was one question about how many touchdowns the Green Bay Packers scored last year in the NFL. And I thought it was a certain number, and I'm the major sports guy at the table. So we all flipped over, and I think I put 300 and something. My little sister, who's never seen a football game in her life, got the answer correct, and her number was the furthest from all of them. We mocked her mercilessly until we found out she was correct. And I was so embarrassed by that. But I also learned that so many things in life, we make value judgments based on the collective wisdom of the crowd or the collective knowledge we have that we have at our disposal, only to find out later that we might have been completely wrong and never had an inclination that that was the case. So I think that's why we're so reliant on other people's opinions, on other people's approval, on other people's metrics, because we need to know where we stand and how much value to lend ourselves. And the truly successful people get to a point where they no longer care what anybody else is doing. They're strictly focused on what they're doing. And I think that's one of the pillars of success is, you know, what does our life look like when we get to that point, when we don't need to worry about what anyone else has on their plate?
I'm still in that point where I try to, for people listening out there, and I don't want to get too techy into sort of podcasting, but you have this thing called Libsyn, which basically is where you stick all your files and it downloads from there. So every time it downloads from there, every time somebody clicks a podcast or listens to an episode or whatever, it ticks a little box and it tells you how many. And that's the sort of benchmark of how you can make money from a podcast, because you then take those figures and you hand them over to an advertiser and say, this is how many people are listening, why don't you stick your products in front of my audience? Simple as that. And I was obsessed by them when it started, and literally refreshing F5 to see it sort of moving. And I've told this story quite a few times, but I set up my platform as much as I possibly could. On the day of launching, I had something like 6,000 Facebook fans, I had Twitter followers, I had WordPress site. I did everything I possibly could. And I thought to myself, right, what I will do is I will boost a post, so I will pay Facebook to send my post out. So on the first day on launch, I will probably get, I don't know, 100,000 downloads, and then the second day it will be 200,000, and on the third day, you know, and it would just go on and on and on and on. Very first day I got 45, and I thought, okay, all right, that's 45, so that's a starting point. Second day I got 55 or something. The next day I got 30. Then it went to 109, and then it went to 20. And in my head I was thinking, how could this be possible? How did
You're like, picking up the support phone number, your system is broken, fix it.
And I felt like contacting them and saying, your stats are wrong, they've got to be wrong. 109 people listened on one day, and then only 20 the next day. That means like 89 people thought it was rubbish, the show was rubbish. But of course, that's not how it is it? That's not. It's those 89 people might have gone on holiday the next day. They might be ill. They might, you know, there's so many different reasons. But in my head, I was thinking to myself, this is a waste of time, even though I'd set it up as much as I possibly could. And I almost got to the point, I was laying in bed thinking, should I just stop? And I didn't. I thought, no, I'm going to keep on going. And I released episode after episode after episode, and this 20 figure just kept on ticking along. And then it started going up, and since then, it hasn't really stopped. And I just think to myself, there was so much opportunity for me to pull the plug at that time, and I was 6 feet from gold. You know, I had to carry on, and I'm so glad that I did. And so many people don't, do they? They see those 20. It's not going to work. It's all right for Mr. TJ Hale with his big Shark Tank podcast. It's never going to work for me, but it can, can't it?
Yeah, and you know, I said something earlier about changing your perspective. So I was looking at my site today and going, you know, something I hadn't considered. I didn't want to peddle products on my site. I didn't want to turn it into an AdWords / there's a gentleman that I'm good friends with again. And this is another cool thing about being online. I've got competitors. Technically, I'm doing air quotes right now. Technically, they're competitors because they're in the same space, but we're all buddies. Like, I can call them, I can talk to them, I can ask what they're up to. One of them has carved out his niche in interviewing people on the show briefly and then linking to their products. So that way, when the show airs and they go to search for it, not only do they find his blog, they can purchase the product from Amazon or from an affiliate program directly off his site. He gets a little bump. Sometimes he offers promotions. I said, all right, well, that's taken. I don't want to do that. What I didn't really consider was, in addition to the money he's earning, which I think he makes a full-time income just from that, I'm like, all right, well, I'll figure something else out. What I hadn't considered is that Google is indexing all those searches to his page before the show airs. And I thought, I had one of those moments where I'm like, you're stupid, TJ. Why didn't you think of that? And so now this week I'm like, all right, I don't need to sell the products, but I need to have something posted somewhere on my site for for any new product that gets announced, because that's going to drive all those people. I don't know what they're looking for. I can't assume they're going to buy a product. Maybe they have a question. Maybe they want to know, the net worth of the company. Maybe we want to know, if they sell in their area. But whatever that question is, they probably have other ones that my podcast and only my podcast can answer, because we talk about a lot of things that are nowhere else. You can't get them on sharktank.com. You can't get them on the, the product peddling sites. They only get them where my site is. And I'm thinking, all right, so if servers get shut down every Friday night from all the search volume, I'm not getting any of that, because they're not looking for those past interviews. They're looking for something that's already been indexed on my friend Rob's site. And so I mentioned this because I'm looking at it now going, my downloads are good. The income is good. I'm having fun. But that 6 feet from gold thing you just mentioned, that might have been something as stupid as indexing those product names on my site before they air. Guess what? I might get 1 million hits in a month from it. And I never thought of it because I'm just new and I didn't know any better. So I think no matter what you're doing, the universe is telling you, is conspiring to teach you that if you're at 20 every day, you may have a good product. You're just not seeing something very small that needs to be tweaked. And you need to your ideas need to mate with someone else's ideas and produce very bountiful offspring. And that's what happens when you're grinding it out.
It is hard, though, isn't it? For anyone sitting out there with this idea in their head that they want to do, and it's been niggling away for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and they're listening to us saying, yes, you can do it. There's still no getting away from the fact that it's hard, and you're going to be doing long hours for no money.
It is hard, and I think part of that's too because they see people who are good at it. I mean, you're David again. You're Iceman, all right? You got this down, and they hear you and go, "Well, I'm not as good as David." So if David's struggling, I'm going to struggle more. And there always comes that point where you go, "Am I doing the right thing, or do I need to shut this down?" And that's the hard. I relate everything back to Shark Tank. There was an episode called Cheeked. And Cheeked was a dating service where you basically give someone a business card with a cheeky slogan on it, and they could choose to go check you out and hook up with you online, and then you could arrange to date them. I think that's kind of how it worked. Well, she had been in business for a couple of years. She lived in New York, so she'd saved up a bunch of money from some high-paying advertising jobs, and she was basically flat broke and desperate. And Barbara said, "Hey, I had a flower business, and I loved it. I loved flowers. I loved what I was doing, and I was going to build the most beautiful flower business on planet Earth." And long story short, she said that flower business would have prevented me from ever becoming a successful millionaire. And that flower business needed to die for me to see that. And so I think that's the hardest thing, is you're always dealing with the doubts of, well, is doing this keeping me from being a millionaire, from being successful, from being what I really want to be? And you need to learn how to fail fast. You need to learn how to do what the sharks do, which is observe potential quickly and ideas. And I think a lot of that comes from failing at things first, from failing at a lot of things. That's how you learn what's going to work for you and what's not. So as much as you want to say never quit, don't give up, you could be 6 feet from gold, you could be digging your hole in the wrong spot too. You might have a good shovel, but there's a lot of things that go into that. So there's no simple answer.
And this is why it's so key that if you listen to the words of Steve Jobs, it's trust, isn't it? That's what I get out of those words. It's that you've got to trust, you've got to have faith in yourself, and you've got to take action.
Yeah, I believe I mentioned James Altucher. He wrote a book called Choose Yourself, which I definitely recommend. And the whole theme of it is you have to trust that you can do whatever it is you set out to do once you educate yourself and seek out all the answers. And that's just a lot of hard work.
So before I send you back in time, sir, and put you on the mic, on the sermon on the mic, where would you like to be in the next couple of years?
Laying on that bed, being hand-fed grapes, like I mentioned. But if I can't do that, it's funny. I just had this conversation with my wife this morning because of the other podcast opportunity. And what I found is that getting to know other, because I was new at this, I wasn't ingrained in that online community. They got all these guys in San Diego now who just sit around and talk about taking over the solopreneur world. I'm still not in that community, so to speak. The one I want to be in really is the entrepreneurs, the people who are teaching, re-indoctrinating people to get away from depending on others for their check, for their single source of income. I want to be in a position where people are taking advantage of the spare time that they have, the opportunities and talents they have to go out and take we talk about the 9 to 5, then there's the 5 to 9. I want to be in the sphere where all the 5 to 9 entrepreneurs that are up and coming know that they can go out there and make things happen. So I would like to be doing on a podcast. I would actually like to be doing a couple podcasts at once, like my friend Adam Carolla does. And because I think that this platform is the future. So I wish I could give you a concrete answer, Dave, and say this is exactly what it is. But if it's not hosting Wheel of Fortune, then that's what it is. Be running a couple really profitable podcasts.
Did you think that the podcast environment, the podcast world, because for many people, when I started doing this, I'd say to them, I'm doing a podcast, and they go, what's a podcast? And I kind of go, well, it's like an online talk radio kind of thing. Right, okay, how are you going to make money from it? But do you think it's going to just continue getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it is in the mainstream?
I do. There's a King of the Hill episode where this guy comes over. Sorry to everyone who's easily offended, cover your ears. And they go, hey, you Chinese or Japanese? And he goes, I'm Laotian. I'm from Laos. Small country between Cambodia and Vietnam. Laos. And they go, oh, so you Chinese or Japanese? And the point of it is I've been wrong before. Like I want to say, now I forgot what your question was. I know it related when I heard it, but whatever.
But is podcasting going to go into the mainstream, do you think?
Yeah, the question is it going to blow up or is it not going to blow up? And I look at what's happened. I have a friend that I talked to in Orange County who was one of the first podcasters, and he believed it was going to be the godsend that would shut radio down back in like 04, 05, when it was podcast was the new word of the year in the Oxford Dictionary or whatever. And he stuck with it till 08 and he quit. And now he's getting back into it. And he sent me pictures of the first podcasting conference he ever went to. It was like 40 people in California. And said, you know what? If I had stuck with it then, I would be the Bodhisattva. I would be the guy. And we had a long conversation about it. And you look at what's happening with automobile manufacturers putting podcast platforms in the car. So instead of flipping the radio or doing satellite, you can type in, Connect the Dots or Steve Jobs or David Ralph, and everything you've done relating to a podcast is going to pop up on their screen while they're driving. And they hit subscribe, they're in your fold. You look at smartphones. You look at the fact that people can access it wherever they are with an internet connection. All these stars are aligning. And I look at radio a lot of ways as doing us a huge favor. You've already got Pandora. You've got songs. They're killing radio. So now all this on-demand content is going to shift to podcasting. However, the other side of that coin is that today, a lot of the podcasting award shows go to this. They give awards to the same people every year. They have the same speakers at every convention. And that tells me that the guys who've been doing it the longest are the stars. The best talent hasn't even arrived yet. And so if I can encourage your listeners in any way, I would say you look at a niche that is totally unfilled and it doesn't fulfill its potential. It is podcasting. I mean, you've got hundreds of millions of blogs in the world, and you've got like 1% of that in podcasts, which means that we need more. iTunes is begging for more content. Stitcher is begging for more content. There's going to be newer and greater podcast platforms. So the people who are going to benefit from that the most are the ones who already have a body of work to show, who've already jumped in and done something about it.
I think that's wise words. I really do think that they are words that our listeners should take heed of, because it is quite cheap to get this going. Against sort of brick and mortar and online business is the cheap way of doing it, and it's got very small risks involved. It's more time and developing your strengths, isn't it?
It is. In fact, I don't know if the co-working space is a big thing there where you live, but they just announced another one here in Phoenix. I think there's 5 or 6 total now in the valley where I live. And these are people who are solopreneurs who, rather than leasing out or letting out space for a monthly fee, they're renting a desk. And these co-working spaces have graphic design areas. They have video recording areas. They have podcasting stations. So now you can spend $50 a month to rent a desk, and you've got Wi-Fi, you've got all the professional services that you need. And you can, rather than going to a radio station and paying your dues for 10 years, if you want to be on the microphone, you can do that for $50 a month with all the tools you need. And you can build up. I mean, I look at Adam Carolla's comparison, 1 million downloads a day. You don't have to do that, but you can get 100 a day. You can get 1,000 a day. You can get 20 a day, whatever. And you can do it for the cost of your time and 20 or 30 bucks a month plus a website. I mean, it's never been easier to do. It's never been easier for artists and for speakers and for solopreneurs to get out there and build that audience that they need to be successful.
Right, TJ, this is the part of the show, the end of the show, I suppose, when I send you back in time, like to have a one-on-one with yourself. And if you went back into a room and you sat there and you recognised your younger self, would you sit down by the side of them and pass on words of wisdom, or would you just ignore that, TJ Hale? I will play the Sermon on the Mic music, and once it finishes, you're on the mic. This is the Sermon on the Mic. Ooh, ah, ooh, with the best bit of the show, the Sermon on the Mic, the Sermon on the Mic. Ooh, ah,
I kind of felt like I was at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance there, speaking of Back to the Future. TJ, this is Thomas. I go by Thomas now because I'm an established man of respect, internet nobility. No, I'm teasing you. I'm the same old guy. I just know some things that you need to know. You need to focus on making sure you know where to put the tarp before the rain comes down. I know you think you're smart. I know you think you've got a lot of things figured out, and that's going to serve you well going forward. But you need to start seeing trends. You need to see what people's needs are. You need to find out why, if they watch something on TV, what's the appeal? If they listen to the radio, what need is it fulfilling? If they're going online and searching for things, what is it they hope to gain by doing that? That is not only where you're going to capitalize and write your own ticket, but that's also going to be where you become the greatest, where you have the greatest level of value. And that is what I would focus on. So hopefully I didn't totally screw that up. I don't know if I was supposed to quote scripture, but I was 25 when I'm sitting where you're sitting in this spot, wherever you're at. Now I'm 34, and I've spent 8 of those 9 years trying different things that all didn't work the way I had planned. And one of them has opened a whole new world. So whatever your moment is, it's going to give you the epiphany to go out there and do that. I would focus on just helping people and getting feedback and answering questions about what people need today, what they're going to need tomorrow, and how you can give it to them.
Mr. TJ Hale, I think that was a masterclass. The whole episode was a masterclass. I know we've been talking about the online world, but really finding your market is the key to success in any environment, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's funny, you mentioned going every day. There's a part of me that's jealous of you because I'm doing a show called Shark Tank Podcast. What if Shark Tank goes away? Then I got a problem. So I've started to interview dynamic and hardcore entrepreneurs that are not on Shark Tank, actually real life sharks, I would say. So that way, if they cancel the show tomorrow, I won't have to pack it up and start over.
that is true, actually, isn't it? You know, because all these kind of niche shows, they have a shelf life.
Yeah, and fortunately, and this is one of those pillars of success, I've had people come to me and go, oh, I just realized that your podcast is based on a TV show. I'm like, wait, what? But they just thought they were getting new entrepreneurs they'd never heard of. So that led me to go, all right, well, if you come and you don't know what Shark Tank is, then who can I put on there that, just like your show, who can I put on there that's going to rock your world just because you're someone who's looking for a good entrepreneurship podcast? And that's all about, what do people need? Fill the need, and you have nothing to worry about.
Well, Mr. TJ Hale, you have rocked this podcast, I promise you. It's been an absolute delight speaking to you today. You've been open, generous, and, of course, extremely talkative, which always makes it easy for myself. So thank you so much for spending time with us today, joining up those dots. And as I say to all our guests, please come back again when you have more dots to join up and more successes to share with us, because it really is a journey that we're on. And I believe that journey is all about, reflecting. And the only way to build our futures is by reflecting and connecting our pasts. So just before you go, how do people connect with you, sir?
Oh, let's see. The website is sharktankpodcast.net, N-E-T, so don't go to .com. I'm on Twitter, Shark Tank Podcast. Instagram is probably my favorite medium at the time, and I'm also on Facebook. So I'd love for people to come by and say hello, and I'd love to connect dots with them, and I just love the interaction. So thank you so much, David, and you promised to be sexy, and you were. Mission accomplished.
Just before you go, was the .net a fishy kind of thing? Could you have got .com, but you went with the net because of the fish?
I couldn't get .com, and at the time, being new, I assumed that's actually funny. My brain just caught up to where you were. Never crossed my mind. I should tell people that's why I did it. That's
Yeah.
hilarious.
As soon as you said it, I thought that's genius. SharkTank.net. Yeah.
And a big one, fish on. No, that's my story. I'm gonna actually write up a blog post right now about that. See if I can get people to be convinced. No, the .com was gone, so I assumed that the television show had taken it, and I only learned recently that it wasn't the TV show. So I'm in discussions to recapture the .com. We'll see how that goes.
And keep the net for a good story.
An amazing story. Yeah, I'm gonna work that into the logo. .net. It's gonna be a little net there catching my logo.
Lovely. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll speak again soon, sir.
All right. Thank you.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice that every successful entrepreneur practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.